Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second colloquium of the fall quarter. Today, it's my pleasure to host Elizabeth Scallon, who will be speaking to us about leadership and innovation today. Elizabeth joined Amazon in 2020 and currently leads the go-to market and operations for Amazon Alexa funds and startups. She is engaging startups and investors focused on ambient and immersive technologies through startup programs, business development, and technical support. Elizabeth has also led the launch of WeWork Startup and Incubation Arm, WeWork Labs in US West and LATAM, and previous to WeWork, Elizabeth led the team at CoMotion Labs here at the University of Washington, growing tech and biotech startups. Obsessed with growth and knowledge, Elizabeth has gone from a degree in biochemistry to Georgetown's Global Executive MBA program in innovation, entrepreneurship, and emerging markets. And with that, I will turn it over to Elizabeth to share her screen and talk to us about leadership and innovation today.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for having me here. I love always talking about innovation. And so again, just really love being back on the UW virtual campus. It's such a great place to be. So of course, right, innovation is always like a fun topic, and it's always like, oh, innovation, yeah, we'll do that soon. Yeah, it's always important. So this is just kind of tongue in cheek. But yeah, so when we're talking about today is just really that innovation is a key component of leadership, and so that, it's really up to people. Like, we either can help create innovation in our organizations, or, we have the ability to destroy innovation within our organization. The power is ours, right? Which is always just interesting to see. So, the agenda pretty simple today. We're going to go through some definitions and background to make sure that we're all at the same understanding of what innovation is. We're going to talk about some leadership characteristics and get into more about what are the questions that leaderships should be asking. We're going to look at some case studies, and then I'll end with a slide of some pitfalls to avoid when you're thinking about innovation for your organization, or for your startup company, or for your project. So, let's just start with defining our terms. It's always important, right? So innovation is a key leadership function, right? So innovation, right, is the action of creating a new idea, method, or product. And leadership is the action of leading a group of people of an organization. So both of these, both require action, right? It requires that energy, that behavior. This is not something that's passive. You can't be a passive leader. You can't have passive innovation. And if you do, it just means that you are not either innovative nor a leader, right? Someone else is leading it and you're just living in their world. And so really, if you're thinking about, the key components, it's just that you have to be intentional here. And there is action that is required of you. So just really good to keep in mind. And so also throughout this presentation, if you have any questions, please put them into the chat. Our wonderful host today, they will go ahead and read any of the questions and can stop me. So again, I want this to be a discussion with you. So please do not feel, if anytime you want to ask something, feel free. Let's make this into a dialogue, 66-person dialogue. That sounds great. So anyways, let's give some background, right? And so businesses and organizations have a life cycle, just with everything. There's a birth, and there's, sort of that peak, and then there's a decline. Well, in the startup world, you begin and so I'm starting from business, but this really applies to any organization, university, research arm, etc. A project, right? Has a very beginning, where you don't know what you're creating. You don't know, you have a customer base, you have a problem you're trying to tackle, but you might not know what your product is or your service. And so you keep on iterating and identifying until finally you have that product market fit, where everyone gets really excited and starts diving in where you're starting to see sales and customer engagement. And so, as your company grows, right, and as your product lines and services develop, you start seeing more and more growth happen, more customers coming. Maybe you're going into new markets. Maybe you're expanding and doing tangential markets. But at a certain point, companies usually start declining as they've peaked out. And then again, they go down. Now, usually right around that growth, when you're having that rocket size growth, there's a point where, before it really starts to decline, you need to start reinvesting in that next item, that next service, and really start listening to your customers and understanding what that is. Otherwise, you will have certain death for that organization. What's very interesting is that the acceleration of this has just really peaked over the years. They say in 1959, a company was expected to be around for 61 years. In 2017, it was 18 years. And by 2027, it's expected to be 12 years to go from very beginning, high growth and penetration, everyone's using it, to who are you? I don't know if I'm completely dating myself, but, I'm almost 40. And so I grew up with AOL. And AOL, like, who uses AOL? What is AOL, right? And like that was like a quick, decline, right? And so you see a lot of these big organizations go through this transformation that used to be household names are gone. And so, very important consultant people, they say that 75% of the companies that we know, the top 500 companies, will disappear by 2027. So again, we see this big transformation. Which is, again, just they're not innovating, right? And you could they're not reinventing themselves. They, they're on this trajectory and they're not changing. So, well, why is this? Well, a lot of, there's kind of two different ways to look at innovation. There's that closed innovation model where, we're going to keep everything internally. We're going to have our ideas internally. We're going to go through some corporation, mechanism to identify if that's a good idea and then move it forward. And then we're going to go to market with it, right? So we're funneling down lots of ideas and then we go to market with them. Well, a lot of people now are just like, no, ideas can come from lots of different places. They can come from startups. We could acquire them. We could invest in them. We can create them. We could, partner, right, with smart universities or engage in, just other corporations and have more of an assembly, right? That again, you can create ideas from all these other parts. And then you don't have to yourself go to market. You can even just sub-license them out. You can just have a part of an ownership a stake. So there's lots of different ways that you can have innovation that doesn't look like it's all internally, but you can actually utilize the market to help you innovate, to help you stay ahead of the game by utilizing, again, just other things outside, right, of your organization. Okay, so those are kind of like the innovation sources for a company. Kind of, old school was all internal, and we do things internal, and then we push them external. Now everything is open, and you can take ideas from lots of different places, and then you can engage with it, and then you can either go to market directly yourself or go to market indirectly with through other entities, maybe the same entities, or maybe brand new entities that together you combine and make new ones. Okay, so some more background information. There's lots of different types of innovation. In my opinion, a lot of people hang out in that incremental innovation. Oh, we all innovate. We're all innovators. Like, yeah, it's like, well, I found a new, I created a new shortcut on me doing Excel, right? It's like, a new Excel shortcut for everybody, right? That's an incremental increase where I added a new process here to reduce this one step. Okay, cool. Incremental innovation is absolutely needed. It creates efficiencies. And hopefully it frees up people's time, right? But there are some that are more disruptive. They go to market and just really disrupt everyone. People say Uber was a disruptor for the taxi cab industry, right? Being able to book on your phone, like that's really disruptive. You don't have to sit there and like wave people down to hopefully get someone. And then of course there's like radical cool technology. All the stuff that UW is creating, right, here on campus, if it's from, random life-saving, COVID therapeutics, right? Or diagnostics. I mean, everything here. I just like, again, UW is just radical in its innovation, the way that it can create. So big fan of just all the breakthroughs that have happened here. 3D, protein folding, right? Like that's radical innovation that will completely change how we do personalized healthcare later. So lots of really cool things that are happening. Sustaining is, like they can, help position in an existing market. I don't find sustaining innovation that great, but again, that's, there's 4 types. Now, okay, well, we have 4 types. Well, is that all the real types of innovation? No, somebody else much smarter was like, no, there's 10 types of innovation, which I just think is hilarious, right? So like if you create like a model, and if someone else had 4 and someone else had 10, you could probably create a model that has like, 7 levels of innovation, and then all of a sudden you're a genius, right? And so like that's what they do. So I just always find it so funny. Is it like whenever you hear something with a number, it's like, someone's just trying to like game the system so that they can seem like really smart. So this guy, this group created one is like there's 10 types of innovations, offerings, configurations, and experiences. Cool. And they have some great examples here of what they mean by that. And so offering, you can have a brand new product offering around performance, right? With Spotify or systems, the iOS system that Apple bought or created. Brand, you can create experiences that people just tie into, right? Like Patagonia, process. They claim McDonald's. I don't know if I would give McDonald's that glory, but they do. So anyways, there's a lot of really cool different types of innovation. But again, innovation can look like, products. They can look like how you configure a process, or they can be about the customer experience of how they're experiencing something and the services that they provide. So innovation, and again, don't feel like these are the only types of innovations. Feel free to keep on pushing innovation forward by creating your new models, right? Because again, I joke that maybe you should create one that has 7. Do it. See what other ones you think that they're missing, because we're not done really thinking about innovation in these ways. But cool. Okay, so also some more background. Well, isn't everything already created? Aren't we all done with everything? Well, one of my favorite things to always look at is like just what's going on in the world. Are these graphs where you can see what are the emerging trends, right? And so these are the ones, and I'm totally blanking right now on what you call them, but like there's these awesome graphs, and you can check out and seeing just where they are on where the technology is and where they are in the market. So innovation trigger right now, they're calling, quantum ML. There's also like called dust particles for IoT and edge devices that is like, also really in that very early stage incubating. People that are like have high hype right now are NFTs, non-fungible tokens, right? And so that is at the hype cycle. So when you come down, there's going to be a trough of disillusion. People are going to give up on NFTs soon because it's just too hyped up. And then after a certain point, things are starting to level out. AR, VR have always been like, at different points in this. And so it'll be interesting to see where that one goes. But, again, if you're looking for innovation technology and some cool new products, just learning about what's the emerging technology, the emerging innovation that's coming out right now, and what are some of that technology that can be applied to different places is just kind of fascinating. So I'm going to stop right now because I know I've just covered a lot. See if there's any questions, or see if there's any thoughts.
I think Victoria raised her hand for a question. Victor, sorry. You can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask a question, Victor.
About like about the like the how big companies are like innovating and doing the continuous innovation, and also how you mentioned like the small company can later profit by simply having the ownership of it. It kind of reminds me of the earlier the Snapchat was bought I think by Google or by Facebook. Like Snapchat was a very innovative social social networking apps that's back in a few years ago, and it was bought by a larger company. So is this like the big company buying up the product of the small company, like a way of sustaining the big company's innovation?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So Facebook did not buy Snapchat, right? That was one of the things they wanted to. They were just like, okay, let's just get rid of the competition. Or maybe that wasn't their philosophy. I don't know. So, but my guess was like they really liked it. They thought it was complementary and they could add to their technology stack and do some cool stuff with it. And Snapchat has done some amazing stuff with the AR glasses and just their platform, their social media platform. So, but they said no, right? Instagram said yes. And later on, that CEO said he regretted that, right? He wished that he didn't. And so kind of interesting to see. And that, yeah, for larger organizations, right, that are trying to like make sure that they don't just decline, sometimes that they get that renewal by buying mergers and acquisitions. You see this a lot with even like candy companies, which you're like, this is one of the oldest just slow moving organizations. Candy companies buy up other candy companies all the time, to again make sure that they can using incremental innovation across all these business lines to streamline their operations, but to also make sure that they're never in decline. So thank you so much for that question. And then I'll just keep going on, right? So and then again, host, feel free to interrupt me at any time. Okay, cool. So how do people react to innovation, right, in your organization or in any organization? And people break this up into, and this is like part of the startup process, right, where it's like chasing the chasm, where it's like, okay, you can have early adopters, but if you don't get those early majorities, you're in this chasm where like you'll just end, right? You'll die early because you can't cross to that people that says it looks interesting, but is it for me? If you can't answer that, you're gone. So, but this is really funny. Like new things come out, and there's a whole group of people that are like, "Yay, shiny new things! I want to go play. I love it." Go to Kickstarter, support projects. Maybe they will buy the first line of a product. And then like the early adopters, like, hey, look, cool kids are getting cool things. Okay, maybe I should go get one of those, right? So someone else had to buy it first, socialize it, make it seem cool, and then they'll go do it. And then those early majority are like, I don't know. I haven't really seen the value, right? What's the value in it as me as a customer? And then, then you have those late majorities that are like, what are these weirdos up to? Do I really need to do this thing? What is this Zoom thing, right? Do I have to be online? Why do I want to be online, right? And so they'll go and do it. And then you have the laggards that like, no matter what is going on in innovation, they're just like, I don't want any of it. I just want, making bread out of my own house and just living my life, off the grid. And so all of these people are really important to your innovation. And the inside of your organization, inside of your team, inside of the university, you have all these people always engaging, at all times. And you may be with an innovator and a laggard. These two are complete polar opposites. And that, how do you engage with both of them? And so when you're looking at innovation too, I always think about this change model curve. And this is usually you talked about like the death process, but again, I think this applies to just all change and all innovation. First of all, like when a new technology comes, people may have shock, like, I don't know what this is. Like they start having to freak out, right? And then they're like denial, like, oh, I don't need to know, I don't need to use this. This isn't going to be helpful. And then maybe they try to use it and they get frustrated with it. Why am I doing it? Maybe they even get depressed. And then like that, like actually, you can see it's like, well, I have to do this new thing. I don't want to do this new thing. I liked what I was doing before. I had that whole process already figured out. And then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to experiment. I'm going to try a project in it. Okay, I'm going to go do a thing with this. Okay, cool. Hey, I really like it, And then it's like, okay, yeah, I'm totally a Zoomer now, or whatever you want to call it. And like, I love it. This is great. So easy. So it's really interesting to know that at both times of an organization, reactions to all this new change that must happen, you're getting people who are like, no, that, because even the innovators, even the people that are right here, they still go through this. They just go through it super fast. They just go through it and they're like, okay, I can change. I like it. Let's go. Right. And so, but this process is always happening at with all of your employees at all times, whenever you introduce something new. And just then how do you speed it up and how do you communicate during these processes so that everyone gets comfortable and excited about it? So I'm just going to stop right here and just ask, what is your relationship with innovation? Are you a laggard? Do you hate it? Do you, are you anti it? Do you love it? Are you, always trying to like get everyone else really excited about it? You're kind of an early adopter of like, yeah, I like it. They're using it. It's cool. Or you're part of like, no, now that enough people have used it, I know it's safe. I know that it's worth the value. Then I adopt. So just, I don't know if we can do like maybe just a show of hands real quick. Are people early adopters? Yeah, we got a couple. Okay, I just want to see this real quick. That's cool. Okay, anyone is a early adopter? Yeah. Okay, yeah. What about innovators? Anyone who's like at the very beginning? I like totally went out of order here. Sorry. Let's see. This is cool. Okay, what about early majority? Yeah. That's smart. I love it. Cool. Sorry, I just like totally just messed up my Zoom because I'm like so in love with it, right? Just joking. Okay, let me figure out how to get that back to where I want it. Awesome. Okay. I have no idea what just happened. Cool. Okay. I'm just gonna keep going. So, anyways, leadership is critical, right, for innovation. So again, you're going through all this change has to happen or your company actually doesn't survive. And so you as a leader, even if you're not the CEO, be the leader of your organization. No one really steps up at all time. And so just always be that person that steps up, that has, their the pole on the ground. They can, push out the rope that's in the, in the water as people start like floundering, right? Just be that stable force, right? So even if you're not actually designated, it's not on your title, you just be it, because life will just always be better if you just take a leadership mindset where, like there might be a big organization vision, set it for yourself. What's your vision? What's your strategy? And if you're not at the CEO or at the top of your organization, set it for the things that you can control. If it's just you as an individual contributor, or if it's for your department, what is that vision? What is that strategy? What is the resource allocation that you're going to provide? And what's the culture you're going to set? Again, when you're thinking about innovation and you're thinking about what you're doing for, for your organization, it's really important that you are in charge and that you're intentional with all your actions and your behaviors, especially around creating that culture for leaders. So cool. Okay, so like some key questions that we should ask that leadership should always just be thinking about, when you're looking around at your organization. And again, this applies to both startups and large corporations, large universities, et cetera. How are problems identified in your organization? How do you know what's, when something is broken or that something, is about to decline, right? You can get a lot of signals through that process. And then like the next one is who gets to innovate in the organization. 3 is how are ideas generated and evaluated, and what resources are directed towards innovation that you have in your control. So how are problems identified? There are a whole slew of just different methodologies. The 5 whys, like, just keep going down in circles of like, well, what, like something happened. Well, why did that happen? Well, and just like keep asking why until you really understand what that core, that problem is. And to understand, okay, well, this is the problem that we're trying to solve here. And so, always just thinking about the deeper issue there. Now, the 5 whys, a simple example is I lost my job. Why did you lose your job? Well, I showed up late. Why did you show up late? Well, I got a speeding ticket. Why did you get a speeding ticket? Well, I left my house late. Why did you leave your house late? Well, because my alarm, didn't go off. Why didn't your alarm go off? Well, because, the electricity went out in my house, but I didn't, and the battery that was on backup, was dead. And so, I didn't know, I didn't wake up in time. So it was like, okay, well, the solution isn't necessarily all of these, isn't the car, the speeding ticket, actually you should never speed, or some of these other areas. It's like, well, you change your batteries on a regular basis, right? Like, let's get down to that one. And so again, you have to dive in to figure out what are the true problems. Sometimes your customers also just tell you what's going on. So are you reading the reviews? Are you listening deeply into what's going on? So some are behavioral, and some aren't. So Socratic method, I think, is fantastic to work with your customers, understanding how people are using the product and having those open dialogues, being, led and focused with curiosity. And there's also scientific method. Well, hey, I have this hypothesis that everything is going fantastic, that, we're doing great, that people really love it. Well, go test that experiment, go test that hypothesis and run some experiments, get some data, come back and really reaffirm your position of what you're doing. A lot of, and so again, how are you identifying those problems in your organization, and how, in which method are you using? So again, lots of different methods, customer, feedback method, really bringing them into the conversation, looking at sales and all these numbers, sure, but those are really the symptoms of what the problem is going on. Is something going on with your product and service? Is something else going on? How do you really identify that? And so again, these are just 3 simple ways. There's a lot more that you can talk about as well. But I think what's really important is who gets to innovate in the organization. So as a leader, you get to set what this means. Who gets to innovate with you? Who gets to innovate? Is it a special department? Is it an innovation lab? And that's where all the new innovation happens. And then again, I'm not talking about incremental innovation. What's happening inside of the for each function. That should always be allowed, right? And so, are you celebrating those incremental innovations? Are you promoting and sponsoring them and celebrating them within your organization? But also just the big revolutionary, innovations, the radical innovations, the disruptive innovations, the one that will make sure that you stay focused. What does that look like? So is there an innovation lab? Is there an executive? Is there someone champion on the boardroom about the new innovations that are coming? Is there a team of people? Do they, is it just one person? Is it an entire team? Is it the entire organization? Who are you really inviting? And sometimes just saying the word innovation, just automatically divides people. Well, I'm not an innovator. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not this. I'm not a leader. I'm not this. Okay, well, why are these titles, creating the barrier? So what kind of culture do you have? Have you talked to your people? Have you really allowed it in? Now, so is everyone empowered to innovate in their jobs? And I think, this is, for me, is where I see a lot of, this belief that we believe that, meritocracy exists, where if you're really great at this idea, that automatically will come up. Well, have you really empowered those individuals throughout your organization to go ahead and promote their ideas and to share their ideas and to get those ideas validated and and championed right throughout the org? So again, I think it's really important to not assume that it will just happen. You have to be intentional. You have to really make sure that it's around the table, or it's in every single person's thinking as they're talking, right? As well, that it gets its validity in the organization. So, okay, so yes, you have problems identified. You have people who are going to go do them. Okay, now how are you going to go identify those solutions and evaluate them? Is there a call for submissions, right? So are you asking everyone in your organization, are you letting people know that your problems, and are you asking for help and a call for submissions? Is there a mechanism in place? Do you have hackathons or investments or grants or some opportunity for people to participate? Is there a person or a committee that evaluates those ideas? And is there a rubric? All of these are barriers, right? These are also all intentional, unintentional barriers that people can have. Because what if that person who's reviewing it doesn't actually understand the technology or the innovation or why it's important? So do you have a way to, what if the committee rejects the best idea and the idea that's really needed? So how do you make sure that the bias that is guaranteed to be all over, all over your organization, how do you make sure that it doesn't hinder your organization from moving forward? And so, again, you just got to really deep down and think about how are these ideas being evaluated, and and just being really intentional to check your bias, to check the to check the ideas, to make sure that they measure to impact that you're looking for. Again, these are great for rubrics, to have some measurements in place so you can evaluate them. Maybe it's the total addressable market that the product or solution has, right? Not only fixes the problem, but also can open up new markets. So there's a lot of different ways to do that as well. But again, it all comes down to resources. Like, well, yeah, we want to do that. Sounds great, but we don't have any budget. Well, of course you don't have any budget because you haven't actually put funding, right? As you're growing and before you decline, have you created some budget? Getting ready for that next innovation that is innovate essentially, right? That cannot be taken for one of the existing business lines. A lot of organizations don't do that. It's like, well, no, that money is in that business line. It's so funny. A lot of innovation departments are actually in marketing because they feel that it's like a marketing endeavor. And so I find that just to be very fascinating. But I believe in having clear budgets for innovation and experimentation, and also having a phased approach, right? Is there, like, for your organization, do you have a phased approach? Do you start with pilots, get some traction, run an experiment, see that it works, and then do you scale up? And do you have money to scale it up to actually show the true impact? I see a lot of this almost theater, right? Like, oh, we'll have a pilot. And it's like, well, what happened after the pilot? Oh, yeah. I mean, we just moved on. Well, why? Like, why didn't you, it looked all really successful. It looked like it was going well. Why didn't you just go ahead and blow it up and make it really big? Oh, yeah. Because we just really like our status quo. So again, I just find that to just be very fascinating how, people can really want it. There's big problems. There's people that are ready to do it. They have these ideas and these committees and they've identified it, and then boom, no resources. So again, I think all four of these are just really important questions to answer and to be honest with yourself and make sure that, again, you create the resources that are necessary. So again, thinking of an idea doesn't turn that idea into reality or impact. That's not how innovation works. We need people to turn ideas into reality and to create impact. And this is, so again, it's not just a one group, one idea and one person. You need a whole group of people to make that happen. And so people like, okay, so who is that? Like, you just need your boss, right? You just need your boss to go ahead and give you some funding and tell you it's okay and you can move forward. No, you need a full load of stakeholders. If you're going to have a new innovation that really helps your organization live past the 12-year mark, okay, well, who are the organizations that you should be partnering with externally? Who are the investors, right? So this could be your shareholders. If you're a big enterprise, it could be actually, other VCs and other groups that would actually help invest to put more money in the company so that you can create that new innovation inside of that company. Maybe it's directly to the customers, Kickstarters and all these other areas. Maybe it's pre-orders, right? And getting people signed up front so you can get that funding needed to create that product. Maybe it's your suppliers and vendors. Maybe you work through an entire value chain. And so who are you working with, to make sure that, hey, they can even produce the amount that you need that you can then give to your vendors to then sell for you, right? Like, if you're in a supply chain and if you're creating something, a physical product, who's the rest of the ecosystem? Is it the ships that are out in the marina? Is it, is that part of your supply chain? Is it some chips that need to be manufactured and we're in a major shortage for that? Okay, what does that mean for you? Does that mean that this is the time to do it? Is that, is there other ways that you can innovate and have that solution? And then, we're in a global community, right? So how's the community going to handle this? And when you think about products nowadays, thinking about them from birth into death, how are you going to make sure that it's handled sustainably? Are you going to take back that product when a user or a customer is done with it? And then are you going to, be able to recycle it, upcycle it? And so what does that look like so that we don't just keep creating trash, right? And pollution for our community. So really thinking about that. And then government, and if you're a startup and if you're really pushing the boundaries, there's probably no laws that even understand what you're doing, right? Like creating cyborgs, right? Will probably happen in my lifetime. Okay, well, there's no government law today on that. So government laws just take a while. And so how do you, educate the government teams and people to be familiar with that? When I was at UW, we actually went over and shared VR experiences with legislators so that they could understand, what this technology is. So when they were thinking about it, and we were looking at it from the film industry, so how could we get more film, dollars and community engagement from the politicians into VR? And so it was like, well, how, let's make sure that they're educated and engaged in this technology so that innovation doesn't seem foreign, right, to them. So I think that that's really just key. So, again, leadership requires creating safety for experimentation. You have to create an environment where you're safe to go ahead and try something, and it doesn't have to work. We don't need to know what the outcomes are. We know what the inputs will be. We support those inputs, and then we got to run an experiment. We have to see what happens. We have to run, to see, okay, can we create that? Does this work the way that we think? And keep on really listening to the data and the engagement. So it's not like you just throw your hands up. It's like, I'll just check back in a couple of months. No. I mean, I'm talking about like meticulously, with data-driven experimentation and true science faction to see what happens. But you have to, at times, just let go of what you perceive the outcome to be, and really just creating that safe space. And then when people fail, celebrate them. It's okay to fail. It's totally okay to not get that right, and just to try. And then, and then take those learnings and apply them to the next round of innovation. So then also invite people to participate. Innovation is not a single person sport. It requires our entire global community. Again, the COVID vaccine, I just think, is just a marvel at the world coming together, and also all the diagnostics, again, it just shows when we invite the world to come participate, great things can happen. And then, you have to remove the status quo. Well, we've always done it this way. We'll just continue doing it this way. No. You cannot do that. It's like you got to just get rid of that status quo, because status quo will guarantee make you die, right? That company, that organization will not exist with status quo thinking. And communicate, let everyone know, celebrate it, let people, in on the process, and let them be a part of that journey. And then, your job as a leader also requires to ensure the business survives. So you can't do every idea. You have to figure out some sort of process and mechanism that works for your organization. But it's up to you to really make sure that business at the end of the day survives, that organization, that, that group that you're a part of. And so, you can't lose sight of just doing really cool stuff without engaging and making sure that there's a business sense for it. Okay, so I can get into some quick case studies, and I'll do that. I think that works, but feel free again to interrupt me if we should stop. So case studies, there's 3. I'm going to go high level with you on them. Vimeo is, I think, just a fascinating story. This is in what I call the point of view approach, where there was the director of marketing, and there's a HTTP article, and I'll send these links out afterwards so I can copy and paste them and put them in. And what was interesting about this one is the head of marketing thought, that their approach that they were doing wasn't the right one, right? And so she created a whole point of view on her approach of how Vimeo should be, basically a B2B service rather than a B2C. Changed the approach. She went around and she built a coalition. She went and talked to various people in her organization to gut check herself. Okay, does this make sense? What do you think? And they're like, no, actually, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. We can, be successful there. She then went straight to the decision makers, the investors, and the investors in the board of directors. And she said, hey, here's my point of view. This is where I think that we should go. And this is why I think we'll be successful. She created a business case, but had a strong point of view. They all said, you know what? We agree with you. we think you're right. We don't think we should compete with YouTube and some others. Let us go in and be the equivalent of Box and Slack, but for video, right? Let's be that B2B video services for company. And so they not only agreed with her point of view, but they also offered her the CEO role. They're like, hey, you really understand this very well. You're very passionate about it. We would like for you to be the CEO. And so she became the CEO of Vimeo from having a point of view. Now, this is incredible, right? Not only did she get that right coalition of people just to support her and excite her, but then being able to tell that story, and telling stories for innovation is critical. What's the vision? Why does this matter? What's going, what is that new direction? How can you be successful there? Creating that narrative is so helpful to get champions and to get people to do the things that you want them to do. Twitter. I also think this is an interesting one, right? So they went out and they're like, Jack came back 5 years ago and he said, we're only going to do the jobs, we're going to have the jobs to be done approach. So what are the jobs that Twitter has to do? And these jobs, provide news, communicate, and they broke it down into 3. And again, I'll give you the link so you can dive into this case study. But what they said is, let's focus on the customer. Let's not focus on, our features that we have or these products, but let's focus on what does the customer expect us to do? And what do they expect us to do well that they actually expect us to do that job? And that we are the best suited to do that job in the world and that we will be the best at it, And so again, they focused on the customer. They focused on the decision-making process of how they were going to make decisions. And then they aligned on their resources and cultures around each of those pillars, right? On the jobs to be done. They did not, so again, they hyper-focused in on what they had to be done and really hyper-focused in on their customer. Zomato is another interesting case study. So this one is about food delivery, right? And this one, what I thought was really interesting is their really big secret sauce, right, was about the relationship of going into markets with the restaurants. And so in their value chain, in the supply chain, they went through, we have to be really good with the drivers. We have to be really good with the restaurants and create those relationships where they trust us, where we can go in and help, they even help curate food for them, identify what's the right menu items, went in and just was their partner for the restaurants. And they really saw, let's have both win-win situations here. And so that network effect for innovation, they're saying, hey, we're going to care so much about the entire value chain that we're really going to provide that next, that indisputable competition, right? You can't compete with us, that moat around the company, because we have the strongest relationships. And if somebody else came in here and tried to replicate these relationships, they wouldn't be able to. Or so they think, whatever, I'll let Zomato have that one. They think they're, that they won't be transactional, but they really do actually go down deep into the companies or into those restaurants to create the really tight connection. And so again, when you're thinking about innovation, it's sometimes way outside of your organization. I mean, that Zomato as a tech company engaging in with the restaurants and seeing that is their innovation, is those deep relationships, that makes a lot of sense. That network effect will allow them then that bridge to create new products for them, really listen to them, be able to make sure that they're providing the services that those customers expect. So that customer intimacy, by looking at just the restaurants as their customers, the users of their platform as customers, and just again respecting that entire group, I think again is just fantastic. So this is my last slide, and then we can open up for questions on all of this. But pitfalls to avoid, right? I have these in kind of 3 different buckets, and it's like bad ideas Okay, like with innovation, yeah, there might be some bad ideas. There might be some stupid things that you do. But again, those will probably be really small in comparison to the other pitfalls that you'll see in your organization. The biggest, the next one is really no budget. Yes, we want to do all these great things. Yes, we're super excited about innovation. Here, we'll say all these right words. We'll be excited about this, but not having budget and resources and engagement to go do those things and to run those experiments, again, is just detrimental. And I don't think that they should be hidden down inside of different like silo departments, inside of organizations that have other priorities. This needs to have high priority and budgets and allocations so that it can maintain its competitive edge. If it does not, that budget will not be there. It'll go to the status quo, because that's just naturally how, if something is starting to decline, okay, well, let's go put more money into it. Let's go do this. Let's go try this. No, sometimes you just need a new product altogether. That's on the decline. That's okay. Things happen. Pagers don't really exist anymore. We're used to going through that process. And again, you'll have a lot of laggards. You don't want the laggards to control the budgets. That is not good. And you also maybe not want the full innovators to own all the budgets too. You want some happy medium of some gut checks and tension to make sure that it works. But the biggest one is ego. Like both ego, like, no, the status quo is great. We're wonderful. We have no problem. So there's that, that ego that really exists. There's the ego of like, well, not you. You can't tell me your idea. Your idea is, you don't meet my level. You're not a senior director of blah, 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 blah. Or you're not this. Again, don't listen, don't let that happen. Don't let the hierarchy of your organizations impact this, right? Or it's just someone who just thinks they're smarter, right? Oh, well, I'm just so smart. Of course, I would be the only one thinking of innovation. No one else can, right? So again, there's all of these funny things. Well, innovation can happen in all the departments. The incremental innovation is fantastic. Well, no, that's also just like so much, that happens where, again, a lot of people don't want to disrupt the people who've made them lots of money. So if you've created a product line and you have that going and someone else is like, well, yeah, that's the past. There's a lot of like, well, we can't upset that person because right now we're still making money off of them. And like that whole process of what's going on, that project, that stuff still looks really successful. How can we give you some funding? How can that happen? How does this look? And so again, just know that it exists. And then again, find how, is that bias coming through? Is that ego coming through? And be able to be open, right? To listen to everybody. Because I think as a leader, your job is to notice all these different characters that are coming, right? And the different reaction everyone's having in that innovation process as they're experiencing it. And so that clear communication, that excitement, getting everyone on that coalition to build with you, provides that ability for the entire organization to then keep on reinventing itself for years to come. And it won't be one of those that in 12 years we won't remember, right? It'll be one of those ones that just keeps on thriving because it just keeps on re-energizing itself from time to time. Okay, so that was my slides. Thank you so much. So want to leave it up for some questions, comments. Any?
I think we have a question in the chat from Denise, and it's about, do flatter hierarchies work better to support innovation?
Yeah, it's very interesting because I don't really know that many flat organizations. A lot of people pretend that they're flat, but they're really not. And so I think flat organizations are just a misnomer for not really understanding that there is hierarchy. Because like, unless like it's like multiple, like a really small company, maybe 10 people, sure, I believe that. But as soon as you get up to maybe 50, I just don't believe that flat organizations can exist, because they don't. there's just some sort of hierarchy if you realize it or not. And I think just acknowledge it, is it through title? Flat organizations are supposed to cut through the bureaucracy and create mechanisms that you can, go ahead and connect in with anyone. That's awesome. And I do believe that you should be able to connect in and have communication with any leader that you want, anyone in your organization, so that you do get that expertise. You get to share ideas. You get to learn, right? And so I think that that's really key. I think that there's great mechanisms to do that. One-on-one meetings, right? So with skip levels or people that on the you've never worked with before. You just look them up on the phone to them. Like, I don't know who you are. You look cool. Can I have a conversation? Or your job function looks really neat. I don't know anything about it. What do you do? Have random conversations as much as possible, just so that, again, you stay in the know of, well, what's someone's world look like every day at work, and what are they focused in on? How are they doing that? Because I think sometimes we just don't lead enough with that curiosity as leaders. And so with innovations, you really have to lead through curiosity. And then, that's both of your people, the problems, of the solutions, and so that you can, and the impact that you have with your customers too. So I just think that's kind of key.
Yes, I have a question, and everybody else can feel free to either unmute themselves or add to the chat. But I think we talked about some great, there's some great information about leadership and innovation in the context of organizations. I'm curious how that applies to a more academic setting. So since you've worked at CoMotion, and we have a lot of grad students who are doing research, and then students who might also go to industry and things like that. So any examples or ideas that you might have about how some of these concepts are applicable directly to UW?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, with UW, I think the first one is making sure that everyone in your department, in your group, feel like they can innovate with you. I think a lot of times it feels like, innovation can only come from this area or this section, and allowing for people to really feel like they're part of that process. So is that through creating a hackathon? Is that through creating, like a survey with hey, how would you solve this problem? And just getting, maybe a survey is bad, but like a Slack channel or something going on where people can just start showing up, or oh, hey, did anyone learn anything cool lately that they want to share? Giving people to open that up, to be exposed to new ideas and to be able to participate, just fosters really great innovation. I think, at UW, there is a lot of hierarchy, right? Tenure versus not, and all of this. I mean, to me, it's, I think just being really explicit about that. Well, what does that mean for innovation? And what does that look like? How do we get, resources that are needed to run experiments? Do we have funding? I mean, the gap funding, the innovation, what is it called now? It used to be called gap funding, but CoMotion has an awesome innovation grant process. I would definitely recommend, applying to that, doing that. There's great ways to set up different business models and business cases. So even like I say business, but they apply to organizations. Okay, hey, we want to add in a new division to do X, Y, or Z, or to go to go run this experiment or to do this research. Okay, well, what's your case for it? Why? And really writing that down or presenting that so that people can understand what that vision is, so that you can tell that story. So focusing in on that storytelling, I think, is also key. I think we forget that people need to understand what we're trying to do so that they can get on board and support us in that process. And then also go get the stakeholders. It's very fascinating to see who really, are the decision makers that aren't explicitly known. There are, people that we don't know that will have impact, that people will go and say, hey, well, do you know so-and-so? What do you think of them? Do you think I should go give them some money and support them? I don't know, right? Okay, well, how do we understand and bring champions along with us so that we can support folks through our journey? And I think that's just really clear of how do I bring them in early? How do I educate them? Is that a one-on-one conversation? Is that bringing a committee together? Is that, making sure that people understand my vision? Is it also that PhD dissertations? Is it, do I present it and then get a lot of that, feedback and go, and then go and incorporate some of that feedback? Like, well, maybe that's part of that process too. So again, what org are you in? How is that structure set up, the culture? How do ideas get brought up? And then what are the things that UW is not doing at all that they have to do? And what are the things that, other universities are thinking about right now so that UW stays, the most innovative public university in the nation? How is it, is it leaving anyone behind? Is there any customer in Washington State that's left behind because UW isn't doing something? So you can look at the problem from the customer. Is education, is everyone in Washington State getting the education that they need? Well, and if the answer is no, well, then what's UW going to do about it? Well, it's like, well, it's not UW's job. Why isn't it UW's job? That would help with the funding with the state. That would help with, grants and philanthropy and donations maybe. So maybe that's another way, maybe that's how you have to talk, right? For other organizations to get excited. Or maybe, hey, the entire world needs, X, Y, or Z thing. And then we have to come together as a UW community to go do that thing so that we solve the world's biggest problems. Cool. Okay. Then, then it's like, well, how do you tell that story? How do you focus it in on the customer, the end user, or the societal problem, right? That just like we know we need to solve, and then get everyone really excited to go solve that together.
Thank you.
Okay, are there other questions out there in the audience? Okay, at this point, I'm sorry.
Yes, one question. I'm just here as well. Matthew, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. So in the conversation, you were talking about removing status quo in organizations, right? This is something that I experienced in my previous startup. So I'm just wondering about what are some ways to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard, right? Because it's like in status quo, people really love it because they've already invested in it. And so sometimes people feel like, well, I already solved that problem. I don't want to go revisit it. And so sometimes it's, well, why are people really in love with that idea that they solved? And is there a better way? And so do you just have to do it in secret and not tell them and then solve it and then show them that it's better and then reintroduce it? Because a lot of times it's just actually that. Just don't tell people you're going to do something until you've done it if they're really against it. And you have money and resources and that like overall it's, it's the right thing to do and you trust yourself, et cetera. And that you're not breaking any laws or anything like that, right? Like, so all those caveats, just go do it. Go build it and then show them of like, I just saved us, by doing this process, we'll save X amount of time or we'll, have more joy, right, in our jobs because we don't have to do that horrible thing that we used to do. So sometimes you have to just show them like really people that aren't, that are on like that, that aren't an innovator or early adopter. All of those people usually have to show, like, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to believe. You have to show them the data. You have to show them all the stuff. So first identify where they're at and then identify where they're at in their change cycle of like, if they're committed like forever on this thing, okay, well, can you skip them and like, don't deal with them at all and then go to somebody else who can be the decision maker where then they can force that person to go ahead and adopt? Or how do you really get them involved with that? And so, yeah, I if it's really good and it's going to solve something for the stat, like, and the status quo is totally against it, and you just got to go do it. Because, yeah, a lot of times you're not going to find big supporters, but see if you can find few, because that a little coalition is much harder to say no to than just one person. And so, it's the power of numbers. It's the power of coalitions too. They can help.
Thank you. That's a good advice. Let the results speak.
Yeah. Thank you, Matthew.
Micro is here. Thanks for the talk. Just one comment and question. It seems, at least from my perspective, that innovative ideas, there's often very many. And the challenge is really like implementation and changing, like often like a culture change. do you have any comments on like the kind of the key parts of how to actually like implement and make that culture change or affect that culture change?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because the really simple answer is that there's no silver bullet. It really, I mean, I believe it has to actually come from top down, because if your top leaders are not excited for change and aren't excited and embracing innovation, it's really hard to convince them unless there's a lot of traction, customer data, revenue, something, right? That just shows like even early pre-orders or something. Because people won't deny when a customer wants something and they're willing to pay for it. Very few leaders would be like, I still say no. But getting that mindset around for you to go ahead and experiment. This is why I think leadership needs to have budgets and mechanisms for people to innovate across their entire organization for the good of the organization. I think that you can't live in this world where you think that, oh no, we'll just keep, having it in these groups and like they'll find money. It's like, no, you have to be intentional with creating money and process so that people can innovate, and celebrating that throughout. But usually, yeah, maybe the board start advocating for at the board level. If you find like your leaders aren't having that culture change, if you just can't fight the CEO. It doesn't happen unless you're a really big organization and you're in a secondary market, right? So you're not in the home, like headquarter market, you're in another geography outside of that headquarters, then you can usually have some more freedom, but then it's who's ever the head of that geography will then sort of be that culture maker.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, thank you all for coming. This has been a lot of fun. So Shruti and Denise, thank you so much. And Emily for being wonderful co-hosts today.
Thank you so much for your time and your presentation. If we can give Elizabeth a virtual hand for her effort and her lovely presentation today, then we'll formally end the colloquium. But if you have questions that you prefer to ask her one-on-one, please just hang around and we'll do that until the last person has left the room. Doesn't have the same effect as a in-person room, does it?
No, it's interesting. I know getting used to all the presentations via Zoom is just is a little bit different, right, than being with everyone. But still fun. Still glad to do it.